Welcome to our deep dive into Sapiens.
All right.
We're going to be tackling excerpts that you've chosen from Yuval Noah Harari's book.
Yeah,
And let me tell you, this is some mind-blowing stuff.
it is.
We're talking about the entire history of humankind,
Mm-hmm.
from our humble beginnings to,
Yeah,
well, maybe even becoming gods.
that's right.
It's really remarkable to see how these excerpts span such a vast timeline,
Yes.
touching on everything from the agricultural revolution
Mm-hmm.
to the rise of empires
Mm-hmm.
and the future possibilities of artificial intelligence.
Yes.
It's like a highlight reel of the most pivotal moments
Yeah.
that shaped us as humans.
It is a great selection.
I guess where do we even begin with something so massive?
Yeah.
What struck me most is that we tend to think of Homo sapiens
Mm-hmm.
as this lone wolf species
Right.
conquering the world solo.
Yeah.
But that wasn't always the case, was it?
No, not at all. You have to remember, the world of our early ancestors was actually quite crowded.
Okay.
There were other human species like Neanderthals
Right.
and Denisovans sharing the planet with us.
It's wild to imagine.
It is.
And get this, there's even evidence suggesting that sapiens might have interbred with these other human species.
Yeah, Harari mentions that in the book.
Okay.
And it really makes their extinction all the more fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
Why did we survive when they didn't?
Yeah.
Was it simply down to competition for resources, or were there other factors at play?
Right.
Maybe even violence between the species?
Yeah.
It's a question that still has scientists scratching their heads.
Hold on. I need a moment to process this. I'm picturing a Neanderthal walking down the street today.
Right.
What would that even look like?
Yeah.
Would we even recognize them as different from us?
It's a question that sparks the imagination, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it reminds us that the story of human evolution is much more complex and intertwined than we often realize.
Okay.
And speaking of complexity, another key turning point Harari highlights is the agricultural revolution.
Right.
Now we're often told this was some grand triumph, the dawn of civilization as we know it.
Yeah.
But Harari challenges that narrative, doesn't he?
He really does. He paints a much more nuanced picture,
Yes.
arguing that the shift from foraging to farming wasn't necessarily a positive thing for everyone.
Right.
Okay, so you're telling me that settling down and growing crops wasn't the best move.
Well,
But why not?
yeah.
I mean, it led to food surpluses, the development of cities, all that good stuff.
Right.
Explain it to me like I'm one of those early hunter-gatherers.
Okay.
I'm trying to decide if I should stick with chasing gazelles or plant some wheat.
Think of it this way: as a forager, you had a diverse diet. You could move around freely.
Okay.
And and you a lot more leisure time.
Yeah.
But as a farmer, you were tied to the land.
Right.
Your work became much more demanding and repetitive,
Huh.
and your diet became much more limited.
Mhm.
And don't forget, if your crops failed due to drought or pests, you were in serious trouble.
Oh, yeah.
Hunter-gatherers had more flexibility to move on to a different area if resources became scarce.
So it sounds like the agricultural revolution came with some serious trade-offs.
It did.
Longer working hours,
Yeah.
less dietary variety,
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability to famine.
Yes.
That doesn't sound like progress to me.
Well, it's not quite as simple as saying it was a mistake.
Okay.
After all, agriculture did allow for larger populations,
Right.
the development of complex societies, and ultimately the world we live in today.
Right.
But Harari's point is that we need to be honest about the costs involved,
Yeah.
the ways in which it might have actually made life harder for many people.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to think about how those choices made thousands of years ago continue to impact us today.
It makes you wonder, right?
Yeah.
Are we still stuck in that same cycle of working harder, producing more,
Mm-hmm.
but not necessarily being any happier?
That's right.
Are we tied to our jobs and mortgages in the same way those early farmers were tied to their land?
That's a really insightful connection.
Yeah.
And it leads us to another crucial point Harari makes about what makes Homo sapiens so unique.
Okay.
It's not our strength or intelligence.
Right.
It's our ability to cooperate in massive numbers.
Okay.
And that ability, according to Harari, hinges on something quite extraordinary.
Right.
Our capacity for imagination.
Uh-huh.
Our ability to believe in things that exist only in our minds.
So you're saying that our success as a species is all thanks to our shared myths?
Yes, that's exactly it.
Wow.
Religions, nations, corporations, even money.
Yeah.
These are all examples of what he calls imagined realities.
Okay.
They have no objective existence in the physical world,
Uh-huh.
but we collectively agree to believe in them, and that shared belief gives them immense power.
Wait, so you're telling me money is a myth?
Yes,
But how does that even work?
it does.
I mean, I can touch it, I can spend it.
Right.
It feels pretty real to me.
That's what makes it such a powerful myth.
Okay.
Because we all agree to believe in its value.
Okay.
We trust that a piece of paper, or even just a number in a bank account,
Yeah.
represents something real, something we can exchange for goods and services.
It's like that Emperor's New Clothes story.
Yes.
Everyone's pretending to see something that isn't there,
Right.
but because everyone's doing it, it becomes real.
Exactly.
Except in this case, it's not clothes, it's our entire economic system.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And it's not just money. Think about nations.
Yeah.
They're essentially imagined communities defined by borders and flags and national anthem.
Or corporations.
Yes.
These legal entities that we give the power to act as if they were individuals.
Exactly.
It's mind-blowing when you start to think about it.
It is.
We've built our entire world on these shared myths,
Mm-hmm.
these collective fictions that we all agree to believe in.
That's right.
And what's fascinating is that this ability to believe in imagined realities has allowed us to achieve things no other species can.
Yes.
It's enabled us to cooperate on a massive scale,
Mm-hmm.
to build empires,
Yeah.
to create complex societies.
Right.
But it's also made us susceptible to manipulation,
Yes.
to believing in things that might not be in our best interests.
That's right.
It makes you wonder, what myths are we subscribing to right now without even realizing it?
Yes.
Are we blindly following narratives that are actually harmful to us?
That's a question worth pondering.
Yeah.
And it highlights the importance of critical thinking,
Uh-huh.
of questioning the stories we're told,
Yeah.
and being aware of the power of these shared beliefs.
So we've gone from sharing the planet with other human species
Yeah.
to figuring out how to grow our own food,
Mm-hmm.
to building empires and creating complex systems of belief
Right.
based on, well, basically our imagination.
Yes.
What's next in this whirlwind tour of human history?
Well, that brings us to what Harari calls the scientific revolution,
Okay.
a period that completely transformed our understanding of the world and our place in it.
All right.
But here's the thing. Harari has a really interesting take on it.
Okay.
He calls it a revolution of ignorance.
A revolution of ignorance.
Yes.
Now that sounds counterintuitive.
It does.
Didn't the scientific revolution give us all these incredible breakthroughs?
Yeah.
Like the laws of physics and the understanding of how diseases work?
It did, but here's what's fascinating about Harari's perspective.
Okay.
He argues that the real breakthrough of modern science wasn't about discovering all the answers,
Okay.
but about recognizing how much we didn't know.
Like that saying, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that shift in thinking,
Mm-hmm.
that willingness to admit our ignorance,
Right.
was what allowed us to make such incredible progress.
Okay.
Instead of clinging to dogma and tradition,
Right.
we started questioning everything, testing our assumptions, and looking for evidence.
So it's not about having all the answers. It's about being comfortable with not knowing,
Yes.
with embracing the mystery.
Yeah,
That's a pretty powerful idea.
it is.
And it reminds me of something I've been thinking about lately.
Okay.
I'm fascinated by all these unsolved mysteries of the universe,
Mm-hmm.
dark matter, the origin of life, things like that.
Right.
Do you think we'll ever have all the answers?
Mm,
Or is the pursuit of knowledge an endless journey?
that's a great question, and it gets to the heart of what science is all about. It's not about finding a final destination. It's about the journey itself, the constant exploration and discovery.
Yeah,
And I think that's something that resonates with a lot of people.
right.
That sense of wonder and curiosity about the unknown.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Because the scientific revolution, it wasn't just about abstract ideas and intellectual curiosity.
Right.
It was also intricately tied to empire.
Oh, that's right. Harari talks about how the pursuit of knowledge was often used to justify colonialism
Yeah,
and the exploitation of resources and people.
exactly. Think of all those expeditions launched during the Age of Exploration.
Yeah.
They were driven by a thirst for knowledge. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
but also by a desire for power and wealth.
That's right.
So the scientific revolution had this dark side,
Yeah.
this legacy of colonialism and exploitation that we can't ignore.
Yes.
Does that make you question the whole pursuit of knowledge?
It's definitely a complex issue.
Yeah.
I mean, on the one hand, we have all these incredible advances in medicine technology, our understanding of the universe.
Right.
But on the other hand, that knowledge has often been used for destructive purposes.
It's like fire, isn't it?
Yes.
It can provide warmth and light,
Mm-hmm.
but it can also burn and destroy.
Right.
It all depends on how we use it.
That's a great way to put it. And
Yeah.
it raises another important question.
Okay.
Are we really any wiser now than we were in the past?
Yeah,
Have we learned from our mistakes?
right.
Or are we still making the same errors, just on a larger scale?
That's a tough one.
It is.
I think it's something we're still grappling with as a species.
Yes.
We have all this knowledge, all this power,
Mm-hmm.
but are we using it wisely?
Right.
Are we any closer to solving the big problems facing humanity,
Yeah,
like poverty, war, and climate change?
right.
I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's something we all need to be thinking about.
Yeah.
Because the choices we make today will determine the kind of future we create for ourselves and for generations to come.
Right. And speaking of the future,
Okay.
one of the most intriguing parts of Sapiens is Harari's exploration of where we're headed as a species.
Okay.
He paints a picture of a future where we're no longer bound by the limitations of our biology,
Right.
a future where technology could fundamentally alter what it means to be human.
He talks about things like genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, the merging of humans and machines.
Yeah.
It sounds like something straight out of science fiction.
It does, but these aren't just fantasies anymore.
Okay.
These technologies are already being developed,
Wow.
and they have the potential to completely reshape our world.
And this brings us back to that question, is happiness.
Yeah.
Have all the advancements we've made as a species,
Mm-hmm.
agriculture empires, the scientific revolution,
Right.
actually made us any happier?
Right.
Or are we still searching for something more?
That's the paradox, isn't it? We have more wealth, more technology, more knowledge than ever before,
Right.
but rates of depression and anxiety are skyrocketing.
So what's the missing piece?
Yeah.
What's the key to true happiness?
I think that's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
Because Harari has some fascinating insights into the nature of happiness,
Right.
the role of our biology, and the choices we make that ultimately shape our well-being.
I can't wait to dig into that. But for now, I think we need a moment to let all this information sink in.
It's a lot to process.
From insignificant apes to masters of the planet.
Yeah,
And now on the verge of something even more profound.
that's right.
Pretty incredible story.
It really is, and the story isn't over yet.
Right.
The choices we make today will determine what the next chapter looks like.
Okay, let's dive back into this rabbit hole of human history.
Yeah.
Picking up where we left off,
Mm-hmm.
I'm still reeling from that idea that so much of what we consider reality
Yeah.
is actually based on shared myths.
Yes.
Like we just decided money has value.
Mhm.
It's all a big mind game.
It is a bit mind-mending, isn't it? But that's what makes us human. We're
Right.
storytelling creatures. We
Right.
create these
Yeah.
narratives to make sense of the world,
Uh-huh.
and those stories, even if they're not true in a literal sense,
Yeah.
shape our beliefs, our values, our entire societies.
And one of the biggest stories we've told ourselves
Right.
is the one about the agricultural revolution
Yeah.
being this monumental leap forward for humanity.
Mm-hmm.
But as we were discussing earlier,
Yeah.
Harari challenges that narrative,
He does.
suggesting it might not have been such a great deal after all.
Right. He even calls it history's biggest fraud.
Wow.
Which is a pretty strong statement.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that farming brought its share of challenges, but didn't it also pave the way for everything we have today?
It did, but at what cost?
Yeah.
Remember, Harari argues that while agriculture led to larger populations,
Mm-hmm.
food surpluses,
Yeah.
and the rise of cities,
Right.
it also came with a whole host of downsides. Longer working hours,
Yeah.
less diverse diets,
Right.
increased susceptibility to famine and disease. We talked about all that.
Yes.
But how did those things actually play out in the lives of early farmers?
Whoa.
Paint me a picture here.
Imagine you're a hunter-gatherer, right? You spend your days roaming the savannah,
Uh-huh.
foraging for a variety of foods,
Right.
enjoying a good amount of leisure time.
Okay.
Life isn't always easy,
Yep.
but there's a certain freedom to it.
Yep.
Then someone comes along and says, hey, I've got this great idea.
Yeah.
Let's settle down, plant some wheat, and we'll have all the food we need.
Uh-huh.
Sounds good in theory, right?
Sure, sign me up. But what's the catch?
Well, first off, you're now tied to this one spot.
Oh.
No more roaming free. You're constantly working the land,
Yep.
tending to your crops.
Uh-huh.
And what happens if there's a drought?
Hmm.
Or a swarm of locusts descends and devours your entire harvest?
You're in big trouble, basically.
Exactly. Hunter-gatherers had the flexibility to move on to a different area if resources became scarce.
Right.
Farmers were stuck.
Okay.
And on top of that, their diet became much less diverse,
Uh-huh.
relying heavily on just a few staple crops.
So it's like trading a varied buffet for a bowl of plain oatmeal every day.
Pretty much.
I'm starting to see why Harari calls it a fraud.
Yeah, and don't forget the social changes.
Okay.
Agriculture led to the accumulation of wealth and resources,
Uh-huh.
which created hierarchies and inequalities that
Uh-huh.
weren't as prevalent in hunter-gatherer societies.
It's like that game of Monopoly,
Yes.
where one person ends up with all the hotels on Boardwalk and everyone else is bankrupt.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to think about how these patterns established thousands of years ago continue to play out today. We still struggle with wealth inequality, food security, and the environmental impact of our agricultural practices.
It's like the legacy of that fraud is still with us.
It's a sobering thought, isn't it? And it makes me wonder if, given the choice,
Yeah,
would those early humans have opted for a different path?
right.
Or were they, in a sense, trapped by the very system they created?
That's a question historians and anthropologists continue to debate,
They do?
but it highlights the importance of understanding the unintended consequences of our choices,
Yes,
even those made with the best of intentions.
absolutely.
Okay, so we've established that the agricultural revolution was a bit more complicated than we're often led to believe.
Right.
What other grand narratives does Harari challenge in Sapiens?
Well, he has some interesting things to say about empires.
Okay.
Now, we tend to think of empires as these brutal, oppressive forces.
Yeah.
And in many ways, they were.
Right.
But Harari argues that they also played a crucial role in uniting humankind.
Uniting humankind.
Yes.
How so? Weren't they all about conquering and subjugating other peoples?
They were, but in the process, they often broke down barriers between cultures.
Okay.
Spreading common languages, laws, and systems of governance.
So it's like, in order to exploit you more efficiently,
Yeah.
we need to make sure we can at least understand each other.
It's a cynical way of looking at it.
Yeah.
But there's some truth to that.
Right.
Think of the Roman Empire, for example.
Right?
It brought together a vast array of cultures under a single political and legal system,
Okay.
spreading the Latin language and Roman law, which continue to influence us today.
Or the Chinese Empire,
Yes.
which unified a huge portion of East Asia under a shared culture and bureaucratic system.
That's right. And even though many empires were built on conquest and exploitation,
Right.
they also facilitated the exchange of ideas, technologies, and goods across vast distances.
Like the Silk Road,
Exactly.
which connected the Roman Empire with China,
Yes.
fostering trade and cultural exchange between East and West.
And it wasn't just goods and technologies that were traded along those routes.
Right.
Religions like Buddhism also spread along the Silk Road, influencing cultures far beyond their places of origin.
So empires, despite their brutality,
Yeah.
played this unintended role in connecting the world and creating a more globalized society.
Yes,
That's pretty counterintuitive.
it is. And Harari argues that this process of unification was further accelerated
Okay.
by the emergence of what he calls universal religions,
Right.
belief systems that transcended cultural and geographic boundaries.
He focuses specifically on monotheistic religions like Christianity and Islam, right?
Yes, because unlike earlier polytheistic religions,
Okay.
which were often tied to specific places and peoples,
Right.
monotheistic religions offered a universal message, one that appealed to a much wider audience.
They emphasized the belief in one God,
Yeah.
the universal moral code,
Mm-hmm.
and the idea of a shared humanity.
Exactly, and that made it easier for these religions to spread across vast distances and diverse cultures.
So like Christianity,
Yes, think about the spread of Christianity throughout the Roman Empire,
right?
or the spread of Islam across the Middle East and North Africa.
So empires, trade routes, and universal religions
Yes,
all played a role in creating a more interconnected world.
they did.
And that brings us to the next major turning point in human history,
Okay.
the scientific revolution.
And as we discussed earlier, Harari has a very unique perspective on this period.
Right, he calls it a revolution of ignorance,
Yes,
which on the surface seems like a contradiction.
it does, doesn't it? But what he means is that the real breakthrough of modern science
Okay.
was the recognition that we didn't have all the answers.
Instead of clinging to dogma and tradition,
Right.
scientists began to systematically observe, experiment,
Yeah.
and question everything.
That's right. They embraced doubt and uncertainty as essential parts of the process of discovery.
So it's not about knowing everything, it's about knowing what you don't know
Yeah,
and being open to learning.
that's the key. And that shift in thinking led to incredible breakthroughs
Yeah.
in our understanding of physics, astronomy, biology, medicine, you name it.
Right. Suddenly, we're not just relying on ancient texts or religious pronouncements. We're actually testing our ideas, looking for evidence, trying to figure out how the world really works.
Exactly. And that shift in thinking had a profound impact,
Yeah.
not just on science, but on every aspect of human society.
But there's another layer to this story, right?
Yes.
The scientific revolution wasn't just this purely intellectual pursuit.
Right.
It was also intricately tied to empire and colonialism.
That's right. The pursuit of knowledge was often used to justify the exploitation of resources and people in other parts of the world.
So it's like this double-edged sword.
Yeah.
On the one hand, we have all these incredible advances in knowledge and technology.
Right.
But on the other hand, that knowledge was often used for destructive purposes.
It's a complex legacy, that's for sure.
Right.
And it brings us back to that question we were pondering earlier.
Yeah.
Are we truly any wiser now than we were in the past?
Have we learned from the mistakes of our ancestors?
Right.
Or are we still repeating those same patterns of exploitation and destruction, just with more sophisticated tools?
Those are questions that Harari doesn't offer easy answers to,
Right.
but he definitely makes us think about the ethical implications of our choices.
Yeah.
Especially as we enter this new era of unprecedented technological power.
And that's a perfect segue to our next topic.
Okay.
Harari's vision of the future of Homo sapiens.
Yes.
A future where we're no longer bound by the limitations of our biology.
Right.
A future where technology could fundamentally alter what it means to be human.
It's a future that's both exhilarating and terrifying, isn't it?
Yeah.
We have the potential to achieve incredible things,
Right.
to solve problems that have plagued humanity for centuries.
Yeah.
But we also have the potential to create new problems,
Right.
to unleash forces that we may not be able to control.
It's like we're standing at a crossroads.
Yes.
And the choices we make today will determine which path we take.
So how do we navigate this uncertain future?
Yeah.
What can we learn from our past that will help us make wise choices going forward?
I think that's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
Because Harari doesn't just offer a bleak warning about the dangers ahead.
Right.
He also offers a glimmer of hope,
Yes.
a vision of a future where we can use our knowledge and our creativity to build a better world for ourselves and for generations to come.
A future where perhaps we finally crack the code of happiness
Right.
and find fulfillment not in material possessions or technological advancements,
Yeah.
but in something deeper, something more meaningful.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground from the agricultural revolution to empires to the scientific revolution, and it seems like every step forward has come with some unintended consequences. But what really stuck with me
Yeah.
is that idea of happiness being this elusive thing, even in our modern world with all its comforts and conveniences.
Right.
What's Harari's take on that?
Well, he dives into this idea that happiness isn't just about external circumstances.
Okay.
It's also about our internal state, our biology, our brain chemistry.
So you're telling me, even if I have the perfect job, a loving family, a beach house,
Yeah.
I could still be unhappy because of some chemical imbalance in my brain?
That's essentially what he's saying.
Wow.
He argues that our brains are wired to experience a certain range of emotions,
Okay.
and that our happiness level are influenced by a complex interplay of genes, hormones, and neurotransmitters.
That's both fascinating and a little bit depressing.
Yeah.
So are we just slaves to our biology? Is there anything we can do to influence our own happiness?
Harari explores this question in depth, and he suggests that while we might not have complete control over our brain chemistry, we can certainly influence it through our choices and behaviors.
Okay.
He talks about the importance of things like mindfulness meditation,
Uh-huh.
cultivating gratitude, and fostering strong social connections, all practices that have been shown to have positive effects on our mental well-being.
So it's not just about chasing external things.
Right.
It's about cultivating a sense of inner peace and contentment.
Yes.
It makes me wonder, are we focusing too much on achieving happiness rather than simply being happy?
That's a really interesting question,
Yeah.
and I think it speaks to the heart of what Harari is trying to get at.
Okay.
He suggests that maybe our modern obsession with happiness is actually making us less happy because we're constantly striving, constantly comparing ourselves to others,
Right.
constantly bombarded with messages about what we should be feeling,
Yeah.
what we should be buying,
Yeah.
what we should be doing to achieve this elusive state of bliss.
It's like we're on this never-ending treadmill of desire, always chasing the next thing, never fully satisfied with what we have.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about all those ads we're bombarded with every day promising us happiness if we just buy this product.
Right.
Or wear these clothes or drive this car.
Right. It's all about creating this sense of lack, this feeling that something is missing from our lives that we
Yes.
need to acquire in order to be happy.
Exactly. And Harari argues that this constant pursuit of external validation and material possessions is ultimately a dead end.
It's a hamster wheel of consumerism that keeps us running but never gets us anywhere.
Exactly. And it's not just consumerism. It's also about our obsession with achievement, with status.
Yeah.
With constantly striving to be better, faster, stronger, richer, more successful.
We're so caught up in this game of comparison that we forget to appreciate the simple joys of being alive.
It's like we've lost touch with the things that truly matter.
Yeah.
Connection meaning purpose, a sense of belonging.
And it's ironic because often the things that bring us the most happiness are the things that don't cost anything.
Right.
Spending time with loved ones, connecting with nature, pursuing creative endeavors, helping others.
It's about shifting our focus from acquiring things to cultivating experiences,
Right.
from seeking external validation to finding inner peace.
And that brings us to another fascinating aspect of Sapiens,
Okay.
Harari's exploration of the future of Homo sapiens.
Right.
He argues that we're on the verge of an era unlike anything we've ever seen before,
Yeah.
an era where technology could fundamentally alter what it means to be human.
He talks about things like genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, the merging of humans and machines.
It sounds like something straight out of a science fiction novel.
It does, but these technologies are already being developed, and they have the potential to reshape our world in ways we can barely imagine.
Harari asks this provocative question,
Yeah.
are we becoming gods, or are we creating our own successors?
It's a mind-blowing concept.
It is.
If we can manipulate our own genes, enhance our cognitive abilities, merge our minds with machines,
Right.
what does that even mean for our humanity?
It's a question that philosophers and ethicists are grappling with right now.
They are, because these technologies have the potential to solve some of humanity's biggest problems,
Right.
but they also raise a whole host of ethical dilemmas.
If we can engineer our own happiness,
Yeah.
does that diminish the value of our experiences?
Right.
If we create superintelligent AI, does that make us obsolete? If we merge with machines,
Yeah.
do we lose our individuality, our sense of self?
These are big questions, and there are no easy answers.
Yeah,
But I think it's important to have these conversations now,
right.
before these technologies become so advanced that we can't control them.
Because the future is not preordained.
Right.
It's something we're actively creating with every choice we make.
And that brings me back to something you said earlier about happiness.
Okay.
Maybe instead of trying to engineer happiness, we should be focusing on cultivating the conditions that allow happiness to flourish, things like connection purpose, meaning a sense of wonder and awe.
Those are the things that make us truly human.
Yes.
The things that no amount of technology can replace.
That's right. And those are the things that will ultimately determine whether we create a future that's worth living in.
So after this incredible journey through Sapiens, what's the biggest takeaway for you? What's the one thing you want our listeners to walk away with?
For me, it's the realization that we have more power than we realize.
Okay.
We're not just passive passengers on this spaceship Earth.
Right?
We're the ones at the controls.
Yeah.
And the choices we make today will determine the course of human history for generations to come.
So choose wisely. Choose kindness. Choose curiosity.
Yes.
Choose to create a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
Because ultimately, that's what makes us truly happy.
Yeah.
Knowing that we've made a positive difference in the world, that we've left it a little bit better than we found it.
And that's a pretty inspiring way to end our deep dive into Sapiens.
It is.
Thanks for taking this journey with us. We've covered a lot of ground.
A lot.
But we've only scratched the surface of this incredible book.
There's so much more to explore, so much more to ponder.
So we encourage you to pick up a copy of Sapiens and dive in yourself.
Yes.
You won't be disappointed.
You won't.
And until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.
All right. Pia Tiao.